Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are, whatever time you're watching us. Welcome to another episode of Pages to Progress. Here we are on another episode, diving in to another chapter of the book that we're looking at. Dee, if you don't mind holding up the book for our viewers to see, it's called A Long Obedience in the Same Direction by Eugene H. Peterson. If you go into the description on this video, you'll see a link for the video. Come join us. Click on the link and you'll be able to order it or listen to the audio version, whatever you want. Come join the discussion. It's been a very interesting book so far. We're in chapter 8. And today we're simply going to discuss joy. That's the title of the chapter. Let's see. Let's kick off with the Psalm. We're in 126. John, would you mind reading the Psalm for us, please?
Sounds good. So Psalm 126. It seemed like a dream, too good to be true, when God returned Zion's exiles. We laughed, we sang, we couldn't believe our good fortune. We were the talk of the nations. God was wonderful to them. God was wonderful to us. We are one happy people. And now, God, do it again. Bring rains to our drought-stricken lives, so those who planted their crops in despair will shout hurrahs at the harvest. So those who went off with heavy hearts will come home laughing with armloads of blessings.
Thanks for that. Very unique psalm. Don't get psalms often, which is like this. I'm so happy that we're looking through this. Let's start off with a loaded question. Maybe I'll ask both you, Dee, and John. Have you ever been a miserable Christian before?
Well, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, John.
I mean, you're a Christian whether you're miserable or not miserable, right?
Yeah, I guess.
And so I guess when you're not miserable, when you are miserable, you're a miserable Christian. Now, it doesn't stem from my Christianity all the time. I mean, most of the time it stems from something else.
Okay.
Dee, what were you going to say?
But I think Pastor's question is your misery stemming from being a Christian? I think that's his question, right? No?
It was still a valid
I don't
response
know.
that John gave because it does touch on some things. But yes, you can follow that line if you want. Do you go for it?
Yeah, no, my answer is no. The only time I've experienced misery, and I've talked about this, I think, here, or no, maybe not here, is when I got baptized. I was strongly encouraged, forced to get baptized when I was like, I don't know, I was somewhere between 14 and 16 years old, okay? And I was so miserable on that day because I literally thought, well, first of all, it was not my choice. And second of all, I literally thought to myself that if I ever sin again after this day, that I would just be struck dead, or like it would just be a horrible thing. And so it was a miserable
Oh, you
day.
look at that. You're still alive.
That was the only time. I haven't sinned since then. No, I'm just kidding.
So someone asked me the question. Someone asked me the question.
So have you ever been a miserable Christian?
Yes, I have. Actually, unfortunately, I was a miserable Christian for decades.
Wow.
A very, very long time. And that's so and John knew where I was going, but he answered a different question. Dee definitely knew where I was going with my question as well, because this kind of fits with the chapter what we're talking about. So I would say growing up, I grew up in a church and there were lovely people, but the kind of theology that I was taught was one where God had this wagging finger over your head. A little bit like what you were talking about, Dee, if I was to ever sin from this point on, I'm going to get struck down. I think that really just embedded very much into me. I grew up in a space where I was taught to connect with God. You had to be very somber, quiet, no jokes. God is a very stoic. You have to take him very seriously, and you have to lead your life very seriously, because life isn't about entertainment and laughter. Life is about trying to win over God's favor. And I think for years I very much lived that way because it's just very anti my personality. I love fun. I love doing all kinds of fun things. And Stoicism really just crumbles me to pieces. Probably wasn't until I actually went to seminary that I discovered, I'm going to call it another God. He was the same God, but I'm going to say he's another God, because to me, it felt like a discovery of a brand new God who gave you so much freedom and joy and passion. So that sets the premise, I guess, for what this chapter's about. I'm sure either you relate or you've met individuals who find it difficult to even crack a smile when it comes to even living out their Christianity. And that's quite challenging in some respects. Here's something that I found was interesting. Before we even dive immediately in, he quotes this Phyllis McGinley on page, what's the page number? 89, 87, 80, 88. I've read that during the process of canonization in the Catholic Church is essentially when someone dies and they basically go through some kind of ritual to ensure that that person becomes a saint. So when Mother Teresa died, there was a canonization that took place for Mother Teresa to be essentially be prayed up to sainthood. And that's something the Catholic Church believe and practice. So he says, I have read that during the process of canonization, the Catholic Church demands proof of joy in the candidate. And although I've not been able to track down chapter and verse, I like the suggestion that dourness is not a sacred attitude. Okay, doctrine aside.
So why though? Because he pokes fun at Presbyterians too.
He does.
And so my question is, why is dourness part of your upbringing? And part of what so many kids hate about Sabbath and church and everything having to do with church, having teenagers in my own family.
I think that God is sold to them as having the requirement to tick check boxes, which does not engage in them having fun, because God is the God of restriction and not the God of freedom. I was always told what you cannot do as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian growing up as a child. It wasn't celebrated what you can do. Like Sabbath was the day where you stop. We stopped watching TV. We stopped, even tried in some seasons, stopped cooking on Sabbath. And we ended up cooking way before sundown. And we had to clean the whole house before the sun went down. It was a rush for the sun to come down so that we couldn't do any of that. And there's merit to that. Don't get me wrong. There's huge merit in trying to create a space of rest, but it was always about what you cannot do. So when you build that picture into the religious practice, you think that's God. He's the God of restriction and not the God of freedom.
And I think that's what you just said. When you build that in religious practice, and that's the problem, is I don't think Jesus Christ came to earth to help us build religious practice. It's a human construct that has led to a misinterpretation of who God is and essentially who Jesus is and how our relationship to him should be. And then we lord this over our kids, and 3 decades later, we're doing the same thing. I mean, unless you've seen a big change in how kids are being brought up.
I think there are remnants of all kinds of different things, and it depends on the space that you're in. It really does depend on the space. I have a feeling that you had a different upbringing. I have a feeling that you had a different perspective.
No, you're right. I mean, honestly, Sabbath day was the best day. It was the most fun day. It was never about like not being able to do anything. It was just all about just being able to spend time with people, visiting with people, and it was all day, all night. And when we got into teenage years, it was like all night affair. I mean, we didn't have curfew, so we didn't get home until like past midnight, just hanging with our friends. It was the best day.
Like Dee grew up in a completely different world, John.
I'm so thankful for that. I'm so thankful Seriously.
And it's interesting, you talk to at least the Jewish people I've talked to, Sabbath is very much a celebration and a day of family, food, friends. And yeah, I mean, so I've always, I think I grew up a little bit more with what you had, Sam, than with what Dee has. But once I kind of deconstructed things and looked at the Sabbath a little bit differently, and this is more than just the Sabbath, obviously.
Right.
All of a sudden I realized, this is really a celebration of creation, and that the rest is really just getting away from what you usually do and giving yourself a chance to focus more on God and what he's created, which includes you and your family and friends, and enjoying that creation changed things a lot for me.
Right. But it's strange though, because I feel like, so as a pastor, I prepare people for baptism and stuff, and I walk through the 28 fundamentals of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and I make sure they know what they're signing up for, and they believe what, they agree with these fundamental beliefs, etc., etc. But we also go through the fundamental tenets of being a Christian as well, about who Jesus is, all that kind of stuff. I never once have turned around and asked anyone, does this bring you joy? And I feel like it's such a valid question, because one of the things that Eugene Peterson does talk, he says on page 90, joy is not a requirement of Christian discipleship, it's a consequence. So this week I listened to a podcast, and it was this ex-Mormon millionaire who basically is on his quest to, he says, live forever, but basically live for as long as he's like, and he's curated his entire life to go to bed at 8:30, to have his last meal at 11:30 a.m. Every single day. He eats only certain kinds of foods, and he doesn't, he lives his life so strict, and it doesn't matter if friends are going out or whatever is happening, he goes to bed at 8:30 every single day, and he's up at the crack of dawn, and he only eats certain things certain time. Like, there's all these different things where he claims that he now has achieved many of the body vitals of a healthy 25-year-old, even though he's in his late 50s. And on paper, on the science, everything looks great. Everything's wonderful. And the interviewer was interviewing him about all these different practices, and it was fascinating. He's a weird individual, but he seemingly has reversed diabetes in his own life, and he's super, super healthy, super strong, and on every level he's an optimum human being, so to speak. But then I was listening to this podcast, and then the interview at one point stopped, and he has a fabulous question. He goes, "And so, are you happy?" And there was this awkward pause over the interview. Like, he hesitated. I could feel the tension. It was so pregnant. I was like, "What?" I was driving, and I was like, "How come he didn't respond immediately and say, yes, I'm happy?" And he went, "Yeah." He wasn't even convincing.
So he wasn't happy.
He wasn't convincing. And it was just like, wow, at what cost have I been taught to be on this quest of righteousness? And I feel like my early childhood and teenage years, the cost of being holy was joy in my life. That's how I think it has been in my life. And I feel like now I'm on a new quest to not just allow joy to be the consequence of my faith, but to teach people that joy is very much a consequence of your faith too. And, it's something that really arrested my attention as we read this. And now when I prepare people, I really want to try and interrogate them to the point, not that it's a requirement, but interrogate them to the point of, does this make you happy? Like, does this give you freedom? Do you feel a weight lifted off your shoulder? Do you feel like that this is something that's going to make your life so much better as a result of doing this? Anyway, yeah, that's what I wanted to share.
And it may not be totally obvious, but at the bottom of that same page where he had the quote, "Joy is not a requirement," he said, America has a depletion of joy in our culture. And he's referencing the entertainment industry, where we basically pay to, what was his, he said, American society is a bored and gluttonous king employing a court jester to divert it after an overindulgent meal.
Right.
And when you look at the joy that's a consequence of discipleship and a relationship with Jesus, and the way it's supposed to be, and you juxtapose that with the joy, quote, joy that you see in the world, it's quite obvious, that the joy that we pay for in the world through the entertainment system is very short-lived, very unsatisfying, and in a lot of ways just kind of gets you spiraled, so you're trying to get more and more of the same thing with less and less, benefit from it.
Yeah, definitely. He goes on to talk a little bit about joy has a history. Did that section resonate with you at all? Joy having a history. He later on talks about that people aren't just zapped with joy, but joy is the culmination of a story that has got someone to that place. That it comes with the story. So it links with the Psalm where he talks about in Psalm 124, are we in?
126.
126, where the quote from the Psalm is, "It seemed like a dream too good to be true when God returned Zion's exiles." The history is very clearly there. We were once exiles, but God came to rescue us. Do you relate with that?
Yeah,
Joy has its history?
I'm not sure you can truly experience the full, he used the word vitality of joy, okay? Joy being vitality, okay? I don't think you can fully experience that if you didn't have the history. Because if you don't have the history, if you didn't have the story, you didn't have the history, what is the background to that, having the experience, that joy, right? So I think for me, in that sense, there's got to be, definitely a past, a history, and of course the presence of what's going on, and even in the future. But
so I wonder if I'm
I
going to
just
open up a can of worms by asking you a question then. Not necessarily to you, Dee, but to you, John, as well, and to us. Does joy cost pain?
Can you say that again?
Does joy cost pain? Is the cost of joy pain? Do you have to have joy? Do you have to have pain if you to experience joy?
I don't think so.
I don't think
so.
so either, but I think, he looks at the Israelites and he references their slavery in Egypt, but obviously the Psalm is referencing their exile in Babylon. And I think the pain of that kind of experience does a lot to accentuate the joy of coming out of that experience and knowing that God was the one that made that possible for you. Does that answer your question?
Kind of.
I mean, can I?
But I don't think you have to have pain to have joy. In fact, I don't think that's the way God originally set things up. I mean, it's the pain comes from sin and what we got ourselves into. And really, a miracle is that we have joy at all in this world. And the pain comes and goes, but that joy can remain.
Yeah, I think definitely I agree with John. I think when we were created, I think that, I believe that Adam and Eve experienced joy just purely being in the presence of God and having that relationship. Yeah, like I said, I think, but for us, we didn't know that, right? We only, basically our experiences, I think, starts with pain. I'm not sure if we ever had that pure joy. I'm not sure. So I think for us, I think that we almost feel like we need to have some pain or discomfort, whatever, to really feel, to be really maybe thankful for the joy that we have.
So I somewhat agree with both of you. I guess for me, where I agree with you, so before Jesus comes for the second time, I feel like we live in a world where joy does cost pain. I feel like in order to experience certain joys, it will take us a few things to go through in order to get there. It's not like I think I'm trying to say that God wants us or has designed it to be that way. I guess let me try and frame it this way. I think that because of how the world has ended up, we now experience a world where you accept both because this is now part of what life is. I do agree with you, though, in both of you, in the respect that I don't think that God has designed it this way. And I think that once the earth gets recreated anew again, I think the Edenic vision, we will know, I don't think joy will ever be characterized by pain. I think joy will be characterized by itself, by God. But God, everything, it won't be tarnished. There we go. I don't think it will be tarnished. And I think that, this is a very Adventist belief as well, which I stand by because I think it's beautiful. I don't think our memories will be wiped. And I think that we will always know the history of where we have come from, and we will know the story of humanity, which I guess, to go full circle, will accentuate that joy even more, to know what we have been through. And much like the psalmist says in Psalms 126, will probably at some point say, it seems like a dream, too good to be true, when God returned Zion's exiles. I feel like that's going to be our psalm. I feel like one day we'll be like, this is like a dream come true. And I have joy even thinking about the hope that God will give us, but it won't compare to the kind of joy of what it's like to actually go through it. I'll share with you and say this. I feel like this psalm is very true for me. Now I'm literally sitting in our first house that we bought. Like, it seems like a dream to me. I cannot believe that this is happening. I've been barely 3 years in this country, and I feel as though God has just blessed us to get to this point where we can even do this. And I feel a whole sense of just relief and joy to recognize, wow, God is so, so good to us. And I feel the reason why, and maybe you can respond and smile at me to say, oh, that's nice to hear. And maybe you've heard snippets of my story, but you just don't know my story like I know my story. You don't know what it was like. The same way that I don't know your story and what it was like for you. Like, I feel like it's so, maybe I'm being so long-winded in saying I feel like joy costs pain on this side of glory.
Yeah, I mean, I think I hear what you're saying. I think joy has a depth, and everyone has their joy that is, I think the more pain you have, maybe the more you can appreciate the joy that you have. But it's different for everyone, because joy is something that clearly comes from God. But it is an interesting, what will joy be like in a sinless world? And I think it will be as good and even better than what it is like in a sinful world. And so at some point that cost changes. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think for me, like, what I use the word pure joy, just pure joy. And what it is, the only time that I experienced it is through my pets, my fur babies, my cat and my dog. They just bring me pure joy. There's just no other way to describe it.
Even when they're killing each other?
Yeah. I mean, really, seriously. I mean, that, yeah. That's just they're there. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. You know, there's one thing I appreciated about what Eugene Peterson did in this chapter. He didn't separate the two, joy and sorrow. He recognized that they come together on
Mm-hmm.
94. Yep, here it is. Page 94, I highlighted this. One of the most interesting and remarkable things Christians learn is that laughter does not exclude weeping. Christian joy is not an escape from sorrow. Pain and hardship still come, but they are unable to drive out the happiness of the redeemed. You know, I guess I hope I don't come across as self-righteous when I say this, but I'm just going to try and be as honest as I can. I think that I do worry, I feel sorry for those who don't believe in God. Because life is heavy, man. Life is really tough. And I have such a privilege to know that I have someone whom I can turn to, who can handle life, my life, and give me the confidence because he is the one who is in charge and in control, and relieve some of that tension because I can literally hand it over to him and say, you know what, Lord, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm just going to leave this into your hands because I know that you love me. I know that you, like, it's so tough for the non-believer because all they can do, and there's merit and there's value in it, is go to their family and friends and share the burden, which to an extent really does help when you have someone else to walk with you. But human beings are so limited in their ability to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and sometimes advice isn't always the best thing because it's just someone's opinion. And a listening ear is helpful. It's like, you know, it's very therapeutic. It's very powerful. I'm not denouncing that. I'm just trying to say that I believe in a God who can do more than a human being can do for me. And so that's why God is granting me the opportunity. God is granting us the opportunity, I feel, to not be so swamped with our sorrow and allow our happiness to be deeply rooted in the fact that we are redeemed people of God. And that's,
Yeah. And then next paragraph, the sentence I circled was, joy is what God gives, not what we work up. And so I think it is very much a God-given thing, whether you believe in God or not. Joy, again, has a depth that God gives.
Definitely. Any final comments, thoughts, quotes, things you want to share?
No, I like this psalm. It was good. And a good reminder of all the things God's done for us.
Yeah.
I think this speaks to almost everyone at some point in their life has had some kind of bad experience that God can get you through. And yeah, I'm thankful for that.
Yeah. And now, God,
Yeah.
do it again. Bring rain to our drought-stricken lives. That's such a powerful line in that psalm. Do you wanted to say something?
Well, I was just gonna say, I think for me personally, I think the feelings of joy, it's the best feeling. It's really the best. I don't think I can replace it with anything else. Honestly, it's the best feeling. Yeah.
So I guess that's all that's left to be said is may we experience joy serving this God on a day.
Amen to that.
Amen.
And so that brings us to the end of this episode for Pages to Progress. We hope that you are joyful and we hope that you experience joy in so many different ways. Next week, we're going to go into the next chapter. I feel like we've gone down now because next chapter, the name of the chapter is work.
I know.
Yeah, I know.
After we finish joy, it's just like, oh, great. Now we go back to work. You know, you come back from vacation and you've had a great time and you You're just not looking forward to that Monday.
But then the next one's happiness. So I don't know.
Okay.
Bounces around a bit.
Apparently, joy and happiness is punctuated by work. So that's probably a lesson there. We're going to look at chapter 9, work, and we're looking forward to spend that with you. If you want to follow along on the journey, please do. Just you can get the book. Dee, if you could hold the book up one more time for people. Long Obedience in the Same Direction by Eugene H. Peterson. It's the link is in the description. You'll be able to click it, follow it, order it, whether you want an audio version or a physical book, that's up to you. Until next time, stay blessed and be joyful. See you later. Bye.